Before we start, this video is sponsored by Sega and RGG Studio. Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is available now on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam. There's also a free demo on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam, so you can try it out. If you watch this video and want to learn more or buy the game for yourselves, click the link in the description below. When Sega reached out and asked if I wanted to do a video on Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, my first thought was, huh? The list of RPGs I've played and loved have sci-fi and fantasy settings. They're made by Western developers from America or Europe. They're your typical loot and level up type open world video games that feel quite different from the Yakuza series. I've never really played a Yakuza game before. I've recorded Yakuza Like a Dragon a couple hours for a video, but that's it. But I realized my lack of experience is more of an opportunity because I can provide a fresh perspective on these games. There's been over a dozen entries in this series, over 20 if you count the spin-offs and remakes. So to come in relatively blind, not knowing much at all, I wanted to know what that feels like. And now that I've played the first couple chapters of Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, I can share exactly what that feels like. I spent most of the early hours in this game trying to nail down exactly what this game's tone is. Because one minute, you're fighting a pirate named Captain Beef who does this,
Captain Beef,
and then screams at you in cow puns.
I'm a grade A, prime cut treasure hunter.
The next minute, you're defending a little boy who has trouble breathing. He's got asthma. You run into a massive bear and tear it to shreds in combat. And then you'll convince a washed up drunk to confront his demons and reach out to his estranged wife and daughter. My initial thought was, what is this game? Like, what are we actually doing here? And the more I played, I began to realize what fans of the series already know. This is Yakuza. It oscillates between the irreverent and the absurd and the heartfelt and genuine at all times, to the point that you really have no clue, no idea what's going to happen next. It's a strange sort of balancing act that, if anything, kept my eyes glued to the screen, just wondering what in the world was going to happen next. You play as Goro Majima, a former Yakuza leader who refuses to put on a shirt. He's shipwrecked on a remote island in the Pacific, and the catch is, he has no memory. He doesn't even remember his own name. Now for me, as a newcomer to the series, this works particularly well. I also have no memory of Majima and his past. Stepping into his shoes with no knowledge of him while he's trying to figure out who he is and why he's here is kind of the perfect setup for me. And from the rip, you can tell Majima is insanely charismatic. He's able to talk just as well as he can fight.
All I did was throw down when you bastards came swinging. No point in spreading misinformation now.
He makes fast friends with Noah, this kid with a pet tiger. He's convinced it's just a cat, but it's a tiger, it's a bit. He just as quickly finds enemies so cartoonishly evil that they kick 9-year-olds in the face. Again, this is where this game slaps you in the face and says, this is the kind of game you're playing, and accepting the kind of game that Yakuza is was hard for me. It tells you the game takes place in August 2024, 6 months ago, but really it exists in its own version of reality. It's a version where a tatted up, muscle-bound ex-criminal can become best friends with a child. It's one where the child's father, initially and understandably, tells you to take a hike and never talk to his kid again. But it's also a reality where you end up fighting the child's dad and recruiting him into your pirate crew. In fact, almost everyone who joins you must be beaten up first. It's like a rite of passage. That includes Masaru, the bodyguard and chef for the pirate whose ship and clothes you end up stealing.
You get to be the captain!
By the time you leave the first island, you make enemies, you make friends, and you find a coat to put on. But you really do get a sense for what kind of game Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is going to be. The intro is punctuated by a musical number with the whole crew singing about being pirates and sailing the 7 seas.
Anchors away, winning our sails, we'll go anywhere. You got the captain on your side, so come with me.
You have to be willing to buy in to the shtick, or the entire thing is going to feel ridiculous. You also have to be willing to sit down and watch lengthy cutscenes, and there are stretches of exposition in this game so long that I began to wonder when they were going to end. But ultimately, it won me over, and I think I hit a point where I realized yes, this is the game. If I'm going to play this, I'm going to buy into what this is giving me. And fortunately, it won me over to the point where it felt like a good book that was hard to put down. While the cutscenes and story operate at varying speeds, the gameplay maintains a breakneck pace. Unlike the previous Like a Dragon game, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii has real-time button-mashy combat. Majima has access to Mad Dog style at first, which is mostly hand-to-hand combos with a little bit of dagger mixed in. Once you don the pirate outfit, you unlock the Sea Dog style, which lets you throw these magical pirate swords that slice through enemies. What's nice is you can switch between these styles whenever you want. The game teaches you to use Sea Dog for large groups of enemies and Mad Dog for one-on-one, but I found them both pretty viable in each situation, so really it's dealer's choice. As you fight, you'll gain experience and money, which you can then use to unlock new combos and abilities. In the short time I played, I already learned some new moves that made a tangible difference in combat, and sort of learning how to weave them into the normal flow felt really good. There's a heat meter that builds up over time and lets you unleash special moves that almost feel like a set piece from an action film. These are fun and obviously powerful to use, but it did leave me wondering after watching the same one 3 or 4 times if I would get tired of them after a dozen or so hours. Majima can also pick up and use weapons in the environment, as well as slam enemies into walls. Most of the fights in this game break out in the open world, so when you're walking on the beach or on the island, a group of thugs will waltz up and have some sort of problem with you, and the only way to solve a problem in a Yakuza game is to fight. And again, it comes with the territory, but every time it happens, it leaves a stupid grin on my face. A lot of the fighting happens during the game's dungeon minigame called Treasure Hunts. These are islands marked on the map that you can visit and run through a gauntlet of enemies to find a treasure chest at the end.
What could it be?
I call them dungeons because you can't leave or use any inventory items once you begin, so you're kind of locked in until you can finish them. You also get to pick your team before going into battle, which adds a bit of strategy to the mix. Along the way are treasure barrels that you can miss if you're not being careful, so it makes sense to explore each corner of these before finishing the hunt. For the most part, I really enjoy the combat in this game. It's such a blast to switch between the different styles and just pummel my enemies into the ground. There's some awesome, stylish combat animation in this game, which I already knew to expect from seeing gameplay from previous games, but you really feel it when you're playing the game too. My only complaint is that sometimes the game becomes so visually cluttered that it's hard to see what enemies are doing. I struggled in the first couple hours to block and dodge properly because I simply couldn't watch my enemies close enough in order to react in time. Of course, I got better the more I played, or maybe that's part of the learning curve. Either way, I hope it's something that's not consistent throughout the game. A big part of this game, and the biggest new addition for the series in general that we haven't even talked about yet, is sailing on your ship. Once you leave the first island, you leave with your very own ship and the world becomes your oyster. Kind of. You can certainly sail anywhere you like, but you're not going to get there very quickly because the game sort of steers you in certain directions. Rather than one large continuous map, the game is sliced into several regions, which makes you fast travel between them if you want to go from like a remote location to a big city. When you're sailing, there are these large speed rings, which are similar to something you'd see in like a Sonic game, any kind of racing game. It propels your boat forwards towards a specific point of interest. Along the way, you'll crash into shiny caches of loot, you'll come across enemy ships that you can fight in naval combat, but by and large, the game knows that sailing is more of a means to an end. And honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing, because this is where I'd say the game's graphics don't really hold up. The open seas and the water in general, they just don't look particularly great. It's something that I noticed but quickly forgave because of how much visual variety there is in this game, so clearly it wasn't like a focus, but I did notice it. Fortunately, that was easy to forget because the ship combat is an absolute blast. Imagine the combat from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but with the training wheels taken off. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is not concerned with silly things like realism or gravity. You're not beholden to wind speeds or changing the tack of your sails. No, it gives you machine guns strapped to the bow. It lets you boost and drift your pirate ship like a Fast and Furious movie. So when you unleash cannon fire from portside, you can boost and flip your boat around to starboard and continue letting hell loose. It's absolutely insane, and it's just a delight. And like many systems in this game, there's a surprising amount of depth. During battles, your crew can get knocked unconscious, and at that point you'll need to hop off the wheel and revive them, throwing down a smoke bomb to reduce damage taken. And then, as expected, you can also take out a rocket launcher when you're on foot on your boat and fire at enemy ships. Because, of course you can. As you play more, you'll find additional crewmates to add to your ship's roster. You can assign these people to specific positions on the boat, with the first mate providing special bonuses. As far as I've played, it feels like literally anyone you meet can join your crew. I just recruited this pencil-pushing salesman who gave me a Segway scooter. Remember Captain Beef from the beginning of the video? That's right, he's my first mate. Every ship battle nets you and your crew experience. There's even a morale system where you can offer gifts to your shipmates in order to keep them in top condition. The ultimate prize, from what I can tell, seems to be to build up your crew, upgrade your ship, and compete in this crazy event called the Pirate Coliseum, where, you guessed it, crews battle out in front of a massive crowd to see who comes out on top. It's absurd, it's crazy, but everything in this game exists in that same register, so it ends up working. For naval combat to be a completely new feature to the Yakuza series is kind of a triumph, because it's genuinely fun, like it's a great time, and it's something I can see myself diving deep into as I continue playing the game. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii, as the name suggests, lets you explore Honolulu. And while I did not play Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, I do remember seeing gameplay from that game and I was hit with like a wave of deja vu. It turns out that the Honolulu map from that game is the very same map used in this game. It's an interesting choice to release back-to-back games in this series reusing the map from the previous one. Of course, the content and the context matters. You've got Majima and Kiryu as different protagonists, and their experiences are different, the stories are different. But I still think it's worth mentioning. If you played Infinite Wealth, it's something to be aware of. As I mentioned at the top, I haven't played much of any of these games, so it really didn't bother me. All of that said, Honolulu is really impressive. This is where it felt like the game truly opened up. I mean, there's still some tutorializing, some things to iron out, but at the same time, I could visit multiple locations, I could experience the mini games and the open world activities, and I could chart my own path through Majima's story, which up to this point had been a lot of exposition and sort of build up to a point where it finally opens up. Pretty quickly, you get a scooter from the salesman we mentioned earlier, which makes it quick and speedy to navigate the city. But I was struck by this game's ability to deliver a very urban cityscape right after setting me on the open sea to sail on a ship, which also came after the intro on a remote island. It's just able to do so many different things at once and cover so much space and still somehow feel cohesive. I haven't even mentioned the other location in the game yet, which is Madlantis. This is the seedy criminal underworld of the pirate fantasy where you can gamble and fight and play cannonball baseball minigames. I only got a brief look at this section in what I played, but again, it's in stark contrast to the rest of the game. In terms of graphics, Pirate Yakuza, I think, is a pretty game, and the cities themselves look great, but I couldn't help but notice many NPCs, they feel dated. The various groups of thugs who stop you in the street and want to throw down, they look like they've been plucked from a previous generation of video game. I almost think the game gets away with it though, because these guys are literal cannon fodder. Like, they're funny. They exist to be pummeled into submission, and the game is aware of that. But what makes it more noticeable is how great Majima and the rest of his crew look in contrast. There's a clear difference in quality that makes these thugs, these NPCs, stand out as looking not so great. As someone who's never really scratched the surface on the Yakuza franchise, I was pleasantly surprised at its ability to draw me in. I genuinely expected to be turned off and to get lost by a story-focused game in a long-running series I had no experience with. What really makes it work for me is Majima's undeniable charm and Matthew Mercer doing an excellent job with the voice acting, and of course, the convenience of his amnesia, which somehow manages to not feel contrived. It's worth mentioning your mileage may vary with this if you're a series veteran. I mean, I could see how a main character losing their memory may not land. It may feel like a cheap trick. It's also worth noting the game isn't throwing the series narrative out the window. It reintroduces characters from the franchise pretty early on, and it gives reasons for why they're there. This is the part where some of the exposition doesn't quite land for someone like me. me. I don't have the context, but that's okay because it's not for me, it's for the fans of this series. Since I've only played the first few chapters, here's my view from 10,000 feet. Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii just wants you to have fun. It wants you to laugh, it wants you to succeed, it wants you to crush your enemies and rack up high scores in minigames. It wants you to pay close attention to its characters and follow their journeys as the story unfolds. Most of all, it wants you to let go and just let it happen. It wants you to accept the weird, wacky, and unpredictable. And if you're like me, who's used to playing more self-serious, more grounded games, you might feel a little resistant at first, especially if you've never played a Yakuza game before. But from what I played, it definitely feels worth it to buy in, to accept what this game is throwing at you. I think the biggest pitfall for me personally is the density and the frequency of the cutscenes. There were some times where it felt like I was waiting for 20 minutes between playing. It really does ask a lot of the player to yank the controls out of your hands for that long, for an extended period of time, and I think that will be a barrier for entry for some people. I'm not really sure if the whole game is like that or if the game starts cutscene heavy to get the characters introduced and then backs off a little bit. Either way, I think that's worth mentioning, that your mileage may vary on whether you're able to handle that. Ultimately, the game won me over in that respect, and I was sitting down ready to watch whatever it was going to give me. Overall, I think it's safe to say that Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii made a strong first impression on me, and I hope this video was helpful if you're looking into the game. Thanks again to Sega and RGG Studio for sponsoring this video. Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii is available now on PlayStation 4 and 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam. There's also a free demo on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and Steam, so you can try it out for yourself. If you watch this video and want to learn more about the game or buy it for yourself, click the link in the description below. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, remember to hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Also, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and ring the bell so you don't miss my next one. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will talk to you next time.